All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone to the Ohio Statewide Family Engagement Summit. I'm sorry, still letting people in. We're glad that you could join us today. This is a day of professional learning meant to take family school community partnership to the next level. My name is Farah and I'll be the session's moderator. This session number is 7, Exchange to Engage, the guide to engaging diverse communities through language. If you have any questions, concerns, or technical issues today, please message me privately in the chat. And to ensure that we all get the most out of today, we're asking that all participants turn off their webcams and microphones. If you have questions for the presenter, please use the chat feature, and I believe we're going to do a Q&A at the end. Be sure to use the hashtag ChartNewTerritories to share your thoughts. And now I am very pleased to introduce Rachel Kimbrough to you. Rachel is an elementary educator holding positions including classroom teacher, English language specialist, and parent involvement coordinator in the U.S. and Paraguay. Rachel joins us to speak about a powerful way to start a language exchange to engage families and their children's learning. Now I will turn it over to Rachel.
Great. Thank you, Farah, and welcome everyone. I'm really excited to be here and be able to share a project that I created and that has had a lot of impact for not only the families and communities that I've served and I've been involved with, but also personally. You heard in my introduction that I've been a classroom teacher, a specialist. I've also been an international teacher in Latin America, in Paraguay, and a lifelong Spanish learner. And currently I'm an instructional coach at an elementary school, and I'm zooming in to you today from Portland, Oregon, which is pretty amazing with the technology that we have today. So I'm here to talk about my program, Exchange to Engage. And this program is also pretty much everything I'm going to be explaining today is also in a book that I wrote with the same title, Exchange to Engage. I think Farah can put the link to that book in the chat. And so let's see. So what we're going to learn today, I'm going to share with you kind of what is an intercambio. I'm going to talk about how I found using language exchange as a foundation for parent engagement in schools was extremely powerful and actually quite simple for really anyone to do in their community space or school. I'm also going to share some of just the personal experiences that I observed, how our community changed and became much stronger through engaging in intercambio sessions. And I want to encourage you that you can do it too. So I'll give you some tools on how to start. And then at the end, we'll have time for questions. So first, I want to just talk about defining this term that you'll hear me use, intercambio. The word intercambio is Spanish for exchange or interchange. And I first became familiar with this idea when I was it was in my early 20s, so not that long ago, haha. I was a student at a language school in Mexico, a summer program, and one way for the students to practice language skills was through kind of an informal bilingual hour, basically, where half the time the Spanish learners practiced Spanish, and the students who were learning English were able to practice with native English speakers. And many years later, after I had engaged in this personally, I found myself working as an English language development specialist, serving mostly students who came from Mexico, whose families were from Mexico. And I observed that there was this huge gap in not only engagement, but just basic communication at our school. I had families who English skills were pretty low. A lot of students, young students, were translating for families. The school I was working at had, even though about 50% of our students spoke Spanish, there were only like one or two staff members who even had some Spanish skills. And after actually several years of working there, I realized that we really needed to do something differently. And I had been kind of reflecting back to being in my time in Mexico and thinking about, we could create something like that where staff could learn from parents and parents could learn from staff. Where I was at that time, I really thought that the biggest barrier to parent engagement was language skills. I think now that it's language skills, culture probably both played a role. But as a language teacher myself, I was really focused on we could do something here that could benefit everybody and engage more families. So, and you're going to see, just a side note, in my presentation, all of the pictures that you see are of the families and staff members and community members that engaged in these bilingual coffee hours in these different Intercambio sessions. So one thing I noticed, and right before I began, was that the teachers really kind of, were communicated amongst themselves, and we hosted back to school nights, that sort of thing. But it was always the teachers kind of on the outside, maybe just like a smile or a shy hello to families, no real connection. The only time that families and teachers or staff members talked were through kind of awkward family parent-teacher conferences, usually through a translator. And so I decided, hey, let's find time in our schedule. And luckily I had the support of my administrators and my bilingual assistant. And we said, let's dedicate 1 hour a week for 6 weeks and invite families and just see what happens. So I had a couple English-speaking staff members who agreed as well to join the program. And we, to recruit parents, we realized that sending out emails, sending out flyers were not targeting people in the way that we wanted them to. And part of that was the language barrier, as well as just kind of the lack of personal connection. So to recruit families to join us in our language exchange, we decided to call every family personally. And at that time, my Spanish skills were kind of weak, and I definitely felt insecure, but I reflected, my insecurity was probably nothing compared to theirs, as people who did not speak the dominant language of the school or the community. And I persevered. So we started, we had a small group, and it was very kind of I was nervous and awkward at first, but once we got going, we left the hour as friends. And from there, it kind of just snowballed. The next time we had a few more people from the school district join us. We had a few more people from the parent community join us. And went on that summer, and we had kind of child and family language exchanges at the playground. The next year, I with our principal, wrote this into our family engagement plan, as well as my personal goals as a teacher to engage families, with the goal of having 50 people throughout the year join us. And we met that goal. And throughout the year, we started with just more kind of surface level communication, just kind of how are you? How many kids do you have? Who's your teacher? I learned, and just from this, I learned kind of how big the divide was. I learned a lot of families did not know their child's teacher's name. I realized just the whole kind of institutional barriers that really were created in our public school system, from just understanding how to register students, understanding that there actually is a space for parents to volunteer, and just through these kind of weekly, friendly, open-ended conversation hours, I learned, as well as the families that came, learned a lot about our community. And then from there, just kind of naturally, just within my professional circle, I began to share this idea with other ESL teachers, other community liaisons, and helped a couple other schools start their own exchanges. The second year of this project, the second year of this project, I was able to, a colleague of mine, we presented at a local conference, a local bilingual conference, and gained some more interest and realized that we needed to put together some training. So locally in my area, we trained about 10 or 15 schools to start their own programs. We also had families join us in the training. Some of the women that first started at my exchanges came to train us as well, or came to train others as well. And time again, at every school, we saw similar results of where the first couple months of starting this, people were a little bit more, insecure, came not really knowing a lot about the school. School professionals really didn't know a lot about the families, often came with quite a few assumptions. And then it usually evolved into something much greater, where the families that came to these conversation hours would then step into some leadership roles, which I'll talk about in just a minute. So some of the community changes that I observed through doing this was, like I mentioned, the leadership roles that parents took. And what that looked like at one school, I know some of the families involved then started running other school events. Like I know one started running a school-wide family breakfast, and kind of they felt welcome enough and kind of felt confident enough in not only being part of the community, but I'd like to say in their English skills as well, to run a school-wide event. I saw some family members, or some of the parents started to attend board meetings, school board meetings. I saw some parents being asked to serve on panels at kind of the school district level. I noticed that some of the district administrators that I was working with at the time kind of noticed what we were doing and realized, oh, here is a group of more diverse voices than we usually are able to hear from, and they were personally asked to join these panels. I saw a lot of advocating for not only just parents advocating for their own students, but also advocating for bilingual programs. The first school that I mentioned that I worked at was started as, it was an English-only school. However, half of the students spoke Spanish at home. And the families noticed that there were a few other bilingual programs in our area and wondered, why couldn't our school have the same program? We started discussing this. We started we attended a bilingual education conference, and I feel like their interest in bringing it kind of caught the attention of some of the decision makers. And I am overjoyed to say today that that first school that I started the program at has now a bilingual program. We also kind of just informing these connections, not only just myself, but some of the other teachers at school. Like I said, we had an after school community program, and some of the staff members of that program. We all kind of, through partnering with the families, kind of saw our own school district through a different lens. We saw that there were quite a few actually exclusive practices happening. One in particular was at our school district had a charter school. It was a public charter school that hypothetically anybody could attend, but the application for the school was only in English, and asked some questions that were really presumptive that people came from a certain economic class, and asked things like how much money would you be able to donate to programs. And after working with a parent who had been interested in the school, we raised those concerns and were able to have the application changed. I mentioned a few times that we presented this at a local bilingual conference. About three times I presented this at the Oregon Association of Bilingual Educators, and each time I had parents who were involved in the Intercambio sessions join me, and they ended up talk about a leadership role, teaching other educators the power of this. I remember one session. It actually wasn't my session, but we were in a session about serving students from Mexico who came with indigenous languages and other than Spanish. And the woman that I was with happened to be trilingual and from that community, from a indigenous language community in Mexico. And I remember she stood up and shared her story in front of a room of 50 people, where she had never been able to really do that before. So that was extremely powerful. I have a short video that Farah is going to show that is just going to show some of the participants, and you can hear from them how the program impacted them.
Tienen a sus hijos, con las maestras de antemano. Se aprende mucho y esperemos que les agrade. Muchas gracias.
I meet new people and I have good time with them, and also I get to have more communication with my daughter that goes here, and also because it helped me to have something positive to do in my life, and before I didn't have a group to go to.
Me gusta porque en primer lugar aprende uno nuevas cosas, nuevas palabras en inglés y conoce mucha gente y es buena idea para poder practicar el español y el inglés a la vez.
It's really built a sense of community in this school. I just feel like more and more people are communicating, whether there's a language barrier or not. It's a strength and a sense of family, really, in my school, than just teachers and the kids' parents. It really feels like we're all in this together, and this language program has helped a lot.
And it's helped develop relationships between the teachers and the parents and the kids. I've noticed that my Spanish has gotten a lot better, and I feel more comfortable speaking Spanish on a daily basis than I had before Intercambio.
So I invite you come and involve, and like me, my English is getting better, step by step, little by little. Con esta clase me he sentido más confortable, más en confianza con el staff de la escuela y también para hacer mis citas allá afuera. Así que les animo a que se involucren, que sean parte de este grupo y que lo disfruten. Gracias.
Back to you, Rachel.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So now I really hope that just from my introduction and just from hearing from the participants that you all may find this a very valuable and simple program. And I really want to encourage everybody that even if your second language skills, depending on your community, you feel insecure about, I would jump in and do it anyway. In my book, I outline just kind of the step-by-step of how to do it. And I kind of realized that in starting something like this, you really need, there's really two roles. One is to just coordinate within your community space, whether it be a school or after school program or even church, you could do this. And that's really the figuring out the time and space that this can work. Schools are always limited on space. I held some of these language exchanges outside at picnic shelters, in a music room, in a space at a public library. That's actually just what you see on the screen here. We had them in my ELD classroom. We had them also at different times of day. One successful time at one of the schools that I started this at was on Friday mornings, just as families were dropping off students, I would invite them into, I always served coffee. And I found that just having something, holding a warm beverage really kind of made it just feel a little more intimate. And like I was talking about, breaking down some of those institutional barriers that are really quite present in schools, really made the difference. And then the other job is really facilitating. And I found that I was fortunate to have another bilingual professional. As an ESL specialist, I had a bilingual assistant, and the two of us were able to kind of do some modeling, as well as just help if there were differences. And usually my plan was we did introductions, and then we played some sort of game. And all of that powerful work that kind of came out of it that I described earlier really just started with sitting down and talking to people and enjoying each other and practicing language. So some of the resources that I used were sentence frames that were just in Spanish and English. These are also found in my book of all the ones that we used on different topics that are really quite approachable for anyone. We played a lot of bilingual bingo. I was able to get a very small, somewhat small, $500 grant to buy materials of just some question cards. I was able to give my participants an English guide, but I kept it, kept it fun, kept it less about me as the school professional delivering a lesson or delivering information, but it was a space for all of us to learn from each other. Okay, and so I think with that, we're just about at the end in time for questions. Once again, Farah, if you don't mind putting the link to my book in the chat, a lot of what I talked about today is in there, as well as a lot more, as well as step-by-step checklists if you'd like to start something like this yourself, as well as the Spanish-English language frames. So with that, I'd love to open it up for questions. And I think you can, if you'd like to write something in the chat, Farah would be able to read that to me.
I do see a question that's posted in there to everybody. The Intercambio, I may mispronounce that, was once a month, correct?
I did it differently. I did there's not one way to do it. I would say something predictable is what worked. Like, for example, I did it once a week for 6 weeks and kind of put all the energy into the invitations and inviting and kind of building it up as a 6-week event. I would think there would be nothing wrong with having it once a month if it's consistent. I think having a consistent time, consistent space. Sometimes I feel like in this kind of, when you're building personal relationships with people, sometimes sometimes the smallest I guess, assumption can kind of fail the whole program. Like thinking that everybody knows where room 401 is to meet, for example, that sort of thing. So that would be my advice.
Any other questions for Rachel? Tammy thanked you, by the way, Rachel. Any questions or concerns or comments? I do see another one here. Was childcare an issue if they had smaller kids? Could they bring their children with them?
Oh, thank you for asking that. And I should have mentioned, I always had a space for kids. That was one of what I learned a huge barrier for many parents, often mothers, to come to any school event was. And so I gathered a donation basket of different toys and had just a kind of a space set up for kids to play. You can see this picture in front of you are actually two young participants. We had mothers nursing, mothers bringing their babies. I felt like the community that I really got to know, the Mexican American community family, was of utmost importance, and kids were always welcome, and I embraced that. And so it was like I said, it was much less a class than just a gathering space. There were both men and women, but I would say most of my participants were women who often kind of connected with each other. I didn't mention this before, but I noticed, I made an assumption that the families knew each other for some reason, but many of them didn't. And some even found out were neighbors in the same, like 2 doors down, had never met each other before, but had kids the same age, and then met each other through these the events, and then were able to support each other even outside the classroom. And then another benefit of bringing younger children is that I remember one boy, a 3-year-old boy, whose mother came regularly for several years. He was comfortable in the school. He knew that the school was for him and his family. So when he was ready for kindergarten, he was comfortable. He was ready to be there.
That's awesome. We have just a couple more questions, but we only have 2 minutes. So I'm going to ask the questions, and then as Rachel's answering them, I am going to drop a survey link in the chat because I want her to be able to talk until the end to answer these questions.
Also, just a quick FYI, Rachel's screen is not sharing. She referenced it, so.
Oh.
Yeah, your slides didn't resume.
Oh.
But we're at the end. It's up to you if you want to. Okay. Thank you, Farrah.
Thank you. You're welcome. All right. There's a few more questions here. Do you, in regards to the Intercambio, was there a time of day that worked for families and supporting staff that worked best?
Yeah, I think that probably depends on the place you're in. The Friday morning worked well at one school. Another school found, this was when the school just had a part-day kindergarten, so we did it between kindergarten times to engage those families. I think it probably depends on your school schedule. The summer program worked great. It was like a late summer morning that was supposed to be an hour. It usually ended up to be a couple hours because people were free. And then I had done it in the afternoon as well. So I think that it probably depends on the specifics of your situation. And the reality is, as if you work in a school, you know that there's a lot going on, and not everybody who may want to is able to attend every time. So one thing we did for teachers is the ones who were especially interested, we kind of worked out a system. So maybe, once, if we did the program for a couple months, at least once a teacher who wanted to were able to come by covering the class for a short bit of time.
All right. It looks like we're at the noon hour. I'll ask one last question. Maybe it'll be a short answer. So I have a question. Our school asks several communities to speak languages other than English or Spanish. Do you think this could work with more than 2 languages, or does it become too complex?
I think it could. I think you may, if it's, I guess, probably depends on the bilingual strength of the people involved. Yeah, I remember having one where a woman who spoke Chinese wanted to come and learn Spanish and English. We didn't have many Chinese resources, but we welcomed her. Or you may just want to have the program focus on English and have it be an English conversation hour.
All right. Thank you so much. We're going to end the session here. I want to thank Rachel. You can join me in thanking her in the chat. I apologize. We didn't get to all the questions. I will save them and make a note, maybe send them to Rachel afterwards. But we encourage you to.
Oh, yeah.
Mind. Okay.
I would say I would love to answer your questions, and if we are out of time.
Okay. I will facilitate those and send them your way. And don't forget to share this on Twitter today using the hashtag Chart New Territories. And we're happy you joined us today. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks.